Hey y'all, this is Joe Gilder with Home Studio Corner. I'm kidding. I don't quite talk like that, but I did grow up in Mississippi, and so did Jordan Boyd Guitar, or at least he lives there. Got a question here I'm going to answer in this video. Jordan says, I live in Mississippi, blur, 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 and he says, I'd like to see a tutorial on automation from you. Sometimes in a song, I'd like to set the volume of the rhythm guitars just slightly lower in particular sections to allow solos to be more present. I've tried finding tutorials, can't seem to find what I'm looking for. And I still haven't found... Okay, so, great question, Jordan. I'm going to show you a couple different ways that I do that. But first, and I know people leave comments that say I talk too much. It's true. But everything, I could just show you that, and that's valuable. But also, we need to talk about... Maybe you don't need the automation as much as you think you do. I've found a lot of times, and I could be wrong about this could be coming from a place of laziness, but a lot of times I've found if I get the mix right and the production right, I don't find myself having to move things out of the way of other things. People talk a lot about, I need to take this frequency out of this guitar so that that frequency can shine through in the other guitar. I think I've done that maybe once in the last decade. Literally one time I can think of where that was something I intentionally did that helped. Otherwise, a lot of times it's just ideas. And I get these questions a lot, especially back when I was doing Ask Joe every week. Regularly we get questions that would say, I can't talk. I would regularly get questions that would say, hey Joe, what do you think about this idea? Every time a solo comes in, I turn down all the other instruments so that the solo can ring out. Now, logically, that makes sense. I understand the logic behind it, but is it necessary? Like in real life, when you listen to that, does the guitar solo disappear? And if it does, why not just turn it up instead of turning everything else down? Does that make sense? So that's the first thing I would say, is if you're having to turn other things down for this thing to shine through, maybe this thing just needs to be a little bit louder. And that kind of all comes back to the whole idea of let's work on our static mix, give plenty of time and attention to that, get good balances first, and then a lot of these problems take care of themselves. Now, to answer your question about automating, there's actually two ways that I tend to do it, and I want to show you on some guitars here. So let's say, guitar 1 and 2 are our rhythm guitars, okay? And then 3 is our kind of ambient lead sort of thing. Now, if we just play the 3 together, let's listen. To me, that works just fine. The lead guitar, the idea here, a couple things are going on. First of all, the rhythm guitars are panned hard left and right. Second of all, they're nice and warm sounding. They're not muddy, but they're not thin. Then the lead guitar is panned up the middle, and it's a lot more of a bright, poke through the mix sort of sound anyway. I mean, that's a Telecaster up high with a bunch of it's gonna cut through generally anyway. So I didn't find particularly on this mix that I had to do anything other than get the right EQ settings and level settings, and everything sat pretty well. But let's say we did all those things and it's still just not quite coming through. I'm going to actually show you the opposite because I think it'll be a little easier to show. So there's a couple ways. Let's say this isn't cutting through and we need to turn it up, but really just in this one section. Everywhere else in the song, it was nice and the perfect volume, but in this chorus, this blob here, let's say that is the problem area we need to turn up. Here's what I would do first. I would actually just do this. And what just happened? Well, in Studio One, I've set up a shortcut that when I select a piece of audio and press basically the plus and minus keys on my keyboard, it increases or decreases that piece of audio by 3 dB at a time. It's the same thing as coming in, cutting this piece of audio into its own little thing, selecting it, and then coming way over here and adjusting this volume here by 3 dB, or by grabbing this square in the middle and manually adjusting it like that. They all do kind of the same thing, but the idea here is we're actually adjusting the underlying audio itself to make it louder. What's cool is that Studio One will usually automatically do the crossfades there, so I don't have to worry about that, and it'll just make it louder. Does that work? Yes, it can. If you've got aggressive compression on the track like I do here, then you're just pushing more volume into the compressor. Sometimes that's cool. Sometimes it doesn't actually help all that much. If that's the case, if doing this doesn't really give you the volume boost that you want, this is kind of like a pre-fader boost, then I would move on to option 2, which is volume automation. Now, if I press A on the keyboard here, it'll actually show me the automation on a particular track. And there's a couple ways to do this. The easiest is to just select that section and bring that up. So this line represents my volume. So now we're talking about volume after all the plugins, the actual volume of the fader itself. If we watch the fader right here, we'll see it's going to jump up 3 dB when it gets to this section. I've essentially turned it into a remote control. And now that is noticeably louder because we're not feeding that louder signal into a compressor and it's being turned back down. It's just turning up the sound of the guitar. So that's a way to do that as well. Some folks like to go through and actually write the automation in using something like a fader port. You can do that. I click on the volume here and I tell this track to go into touch mode. So that's an automation mode where when I touch the fader, it's going to move. So that this would look something like this. I have to play the part now. So I can get as crazy as I want. I can put it back into read mode, and it's going to basically read what I just wrote into it. Create your own tremolo effect. I honestly do this very little. Sometimes on a vocal, sometimes on sections that don't have a lot of movement, that need some movement. But generally speaking, I've kind of shown you in order of the way that I do it. First, I just adjust the volume of the clip itself. If that doesn't work, I'll do some automation like this, where I'm just automating the volume up and down for a chunk as opposed to writing in all these little automation moves. Those little automation moves, we can get a little romantic about them. A lot of times, 9 times out of 10, I would say you just need to turn up the volume of a particular section, not actually write it in this very precise way. Okay, so Jordan, I hope that helps. If you're using Studio One, this is exactly how to do it. If you're not, this is really basic automation technique in any system. Any system I've used has something that looks a lot like this, whether it's Pro Tools, Logic, Cubase, whatever. They will all have some form of this automation. So find out how your system does it. Poke around in the menus. Look in the menus over here. You will see it. This is how you do it. And don't go overboard with it. Just like anything, you can have too much of a good thing. I automate when absolutely necessary, but I don't do it all over the place. And to me, that's a good way of working so I don't get lost in the weeds. All right, that's it for me. My name's Joe Gilder from Home Studio Corner. If you like this video, there's more on my channel. Go check it out. Subscribe if it's something you're into. And thank you for watching. I'll see you in the next one.